let's talk about some of the ridiculousness that is Porsche's special editions. And in this video, I'm going to look at the 911 GT3 Australia edition, which is apt given that I am Australian. And I'm going to go through why this is kind of an overpriced options package. Now, as an aside, I'd regard the ordinary GT3 as significantly better value than the GT3 Touring, but that's a totally different issue. What I'm going to look at here are the issues with this special edition. You could in fact get all of this for less if you just optioned up an ordinary GT3 Touring. Now granted, it would not be one of 25 of these special edition cars, but you would have effectively the same thing for a lot less money. So we can first go to Porsche's own newsroom and see the underwhelming information they've provided about it. So in their press release, they've said, Porsche announces 911 GT3 70 years Porsche Australia edition, exclusive to the Australian market. Then if we go on and see the information they say about it, it really is a little bit vague. It says, the Porsche 911 GT3 70 years Porsche Australia edition. Is that its official name? I mean, that's cumbersome. Will be available with either manual or PDK transmissions, with deliveries to commence at the end of 2021. The edition is based on the new 911 GT3 with Touring package, Type 992, which was also unveiled today. It is the first time that Porsche has based a market-specific edition on a 911 GT product, and the first time a special edition has been created by Porsche for the Australian market. Now I want to stop there and say that really is pretty meaningless. Once you start slicing everything into tiny slices, everything is a first time. So let's face it, we can't really read too much into that. Then it says, I congratulate Australia on such a significant milestone, says Matthias Becker, Vice President Region Overseas and Emerging Markets at Porsche AG. I'm pleased to see that the occasion is being celebrated in style with this sensational special edition, a sports car that links right back to the start of our journey in Australia, and that any Porsche enthusiast would be proud to own. Then we continue on and they say some information about its exterior, i.e. the special edition paint that they have here, and we can see some pictures, and we'll go into a little bit more detail in a second. But the pictures do look rather nice, but every picture when it's mocked up is going to look rather nice. Then we can continue further down, and it says interior here, and interior, like I'll get to in a second, is very similar to the ordinary GT3 interior, but we do have some nice seats. Well, nice-ish seats, I don't like them, but unique seats in any case. And then we have, I guess, a full list of things that you get with it. Exterior in a custom color, which is effectively a fancy grey. Wheels painted in dark silver, badge on the B pillar, full bucket seats, dashboard trim in silver grey metallic with the Australia edition lettering, center console trim painted, storage compartment with a 70 logo, gear shift paddle in crayon, door store guards in aluminium with the Australia special edition content on it, GT3 multifunction sport seats, vehicle keys painted in the color, key pouch in leather in that color, and also you get a car cover. So that's effectively what I've got here. Then some exclusive manufacturer stuff such as Chrono package, light design package, tinted LED main lights, brake calipers, wheels painted in dark silver, which we've already mentioned, lightweight full bucket seats. There's a lot of repetition here. It's pretty much the same things, but repeated in another list. So regardless, then other features standard on the GT3 are automatically dimming mirrors, lifting system for the front axle, park assist for the rear only, rear view camera, which should be standard in every car at this price point. But if we look at Ferrari still charges you extra for these. I know because I called up about an F8 Tributo, and then they were like, oh, it depends on what options you get as to how much it will cost. If you get reverse camera, that will cost you more. I'm like, reverse camera? Does that not come standard? Anyway, obviously I'm ignorant about Ferrari pricing. Rear view camera should be standard. And digital radio. Then further on we have more fluff, and it says it's starting here at 494,000 Australian dollars, which is effectively $100,000 more than the standard GT3 that one can order. So that is effectively what we are seeing with the GT3 Australia edition. It's a rather fancy, limited edition car. There aren't many of them being produced, but nevertheless, it is perhaps a little bit underwhelming, which is what we're going to see in just a second. and we'll have a look in more detail at exactly what we get. So the best way to see the Australia edition is to look at Porsche's website. So on Porsche's website, we can see the edition right here, celebrating 70 years of Porsche being in Australia. Now, 70 years doesn't sound like a particularly meaningful milestone, but it gives them an excuse to make a special edition. Now, fun fact, I had a Cayman S Black Edition, which on the used car market was actually decent value since they didn't really pay that much more than a normal Cayman S for it. So that was actually okay because it had marginal benefits to it, maybe. This, however, doesn't seem to come with that much more, although it does come with a little bit. So what we see here is we have a GT3 Touring. This GT3 Touring is clearly in silver. Now, silver is maybe not my favorite color for this car. However, if you were getting a silver car, then there are worse silvers. It is apparently a special silver. It's a silver metallic paint here that they have kind of noted as being special and unique and harking back to when the 356 was brought into Australia. Personally, I don't see the 356 images here. The silver on these pictures looks rather different to me, but nevertheless, that's the cell they're going with. Otherwise, on the outside, what we can immediately see is the wheels. We've got slightly different ones here. I mean, you could get these spec'd up, but the wheels have like this dark silver alloy finish. Now, I do like the dark silver alloy. I like it because it's darker, it creates some contrast. I think it looks better than ordinary silver, but it isn't black wheels, and sometimes, I don't know, I feel like the trend of doing black wheels is kind of, we've moved on a little bit from that. But, I mean, other people might have different views on that. So in any case, that's the basic outside of the car. Now, there clearly are going to be some options that we'll need to go through. But if we further go down here, we can see the front of the car. It looks rather like an ordinary GT3 Touring. Not terribly much else to say about the initial front of the car. Now, the GT3 Touring is a reasonably attractive car. The front is very similar to the ordinary GT3. We have these vents, which I think add interest to the 911 look. We do appear to have smoked headlights right here, or at least that's what it looks like in terms of those. Although, let's face it, I don't know that smoked headlights are really something I would pay for. I mean, I don't get it really for most cars, but if it's something that you're into, I guess go for it. So that's effectively what we've got otherwise on the outside. Now, if we keep going down, what we'll immediately see is the back again looks very similar. Now, there are some incremental minor changes to some of the badging. These are really quite minor, and while Porsche charges you for options for everything, I don't necessarily regard them as being that important necessarily. But we've got GT3 Touring features in general terms as having been included on this. Now, if we continue down to the interior is where we start to see some differences. On the interior, what we immediately see, is we immediately see the seats are different. We have this plaid or check pattern color. Now, I don't get why one would really want this over plain seats. I don't understand why this is an extra. Someone let me know in the comments below why it's special, because I don't understand it. Furthermore, you do get crayon coloring in various parts of the interior, which, I mean, is nice. So you can kind of see it with the deviated stitching right here, for example, and right over here. So you definitely do get some of this, and you definitely do get some interior upgrades. For example, you get light design upgrade. For example, you get crayon coloring in various places. You get the seat with this fabric. You get leather cup holders. So you do get some stuff here. Furthermore, you get the Bose sound system, which, I mean, is nice to have. I don't know that anyone in a Porsche has necessarily really needed the upgraded sound system, but there we go. And obviously we get the race seats in here as well. So that's effectively what we are seeing in terms of the interior, generally speaking. Furthermore, you get some badging. So this angle does not give the badging that much prominence. But what one can see here over in the pillars is there's a badging telling people that it's Australia edition with a little Australian flag here. Now, if badging is important to you, then it has badging. I wouldn't pay more for it, but anyway. Furthermore, we do have the Chrono package, which, I mean, yeah, you would get that in a GT3 anyway. So yeah, I don't really know why that's really necessarily being mentioned. But otherwise, you don't really get any performance benefits. That's effectively what the interior looks like. There's no real benefit in terms of it moving faster, not really that much benefit in terms of other related things that are going to make it drive better, move faster, do a better job at being a GT3. Rather, you do get some minor design highlights. Now, this is, to my mind, much like the special edition Targa that they had. Not terribly much improvement, but it still was a special edition. And that's effectively what they're trying to market it as. Now, whether it's worth getting all comes down to, you get these additional options, but would you buy them anyway? And two, how much are you being charged for them? Because if you're getting a great bargain on these options, and they're options you would generally want, or they're ones you kind of like, then sure, it makes sense. But the Australia edition is being marketed as a good $100,000 more than the standard GT3. So we're seeing a significant price uplift for effectively a special edition. Now, granted, there aren't many of these cars, but there's not really that much that's unique about it, other than the mere fact that there aren't many of these cars being produced. So that's effectively what we're seeing in terms of the GT3 Australia edition. Now, clearly, it's going to appeal to some people. It's going to appeal to people in terms of those who want a special edition. Maybe some people who are buying it, thinking that it will go up in value because there aren't many cars. So that could be one reason why it might get some attraction or some appeal. But I'm not sure that that would be enough to convince me. And I'm not sure that these random special editions necessarily hold that much value. Because let's face it, if the special edition doesn't really add much performance-wise, and is effectively just an option pack, then how special really is it? And if everything ultimately ends up being special, or we have myriad special editions all over the place, how much do we really gain from having this special edition? Even if it is the case that only 25 are ultimately produced. You still aren't necessarily gaining that much from it. So that's effectively what we've got with the Australia edition. Now let's compare it to the GT3 Touring and see how we could spec it up to get what we've got in the Australia edition and do this for less money. So I'll click on Build My Own, and then we'll be able to configure the Touring. So here I have the configurator loaded. Now what we'll first need to do is we'll need to choose the color that is going to largely match the Australia edition. Now the Australia edition is in its own proprietary color, its own silver that's supposed to be 356 like. I think it's just dark silver, and what you'll tell here is all of our metallic colors are a $0 option. So you can click a dark silver here, and it's going to give us a close analog to the Australia edition. The silver is not the exact same, but it is very, very similar. There are several silver options you can choose from at this price. I'll go with dark silver. If I were to spec my GT3, I would probably not choose any of these colors. I would probably actually pay for a special color. I would personally probably not in a Touring, but in a plain GT3, maybe go with green or with blue. But that's not the Australia edition. The Australia edition is silver. So we're going to go with silver. Now one can argue that because it's a special color, it really should be under paint to sample. I would argue that it shouldn't be, because dark silver is dark silver. No one cares about the incremental slight differences in dark silver. So that's what we're going with. Now in terms of the wheels here, we don't really have that many options in terms of the wheel design, but I'll keep it as plain wheel design. However, we will potentially be able to alter part of the wheel, i.e. alter things such as the color. Now what we do need to do is we need to go down to dark silver here. That's because that's the wheel color that the Australia edition comes in. That's a $2,500 extra. I think it's worth it. If you're going to spend $400,000 in a car Australian, don't cheap out on your wheels. It will make a difference to selling it, having a decent spec on the car. So that's what we've got in terms of the wheels. Now, the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go to interior options. Now, the Australia edition has some interior options, but some of them really aren't that important. and or aren't that expensive. So what we'll do is we can, in the interior here, we'll start off as our basic upholstery, which is plain black. Now one could go with this two-tone at $11,000. No, that is super expensive and to my mind, pointless. I have no idea why you'd spend that. And it doesn't look anywhere like the Australia edition anyway, so that would be a pointless use of money to try to reflect it. So in reality, it's going to be very difficult for us to replicate the exact seat center. Because you might recall that in the center here, we had like this tartan or check pattern. It is going to be very difficult for us to do this. We'd have to go with some exclusive manufacturer on here, which could potentially be expensive. So it will be difficult to get that seat interior. However, like I said, you're effectively bringing fabric into your interior. To my mind, that's worse than leather. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in any case, I don't see how that's an option, but we don't really have the ability to upgrade to that, to be clear. Now, you can maybe factor in 20,000 here for 11,000, sorry, for this fabric, but I don't think we can really add that one at the moment. In terms of the seats, well, the seats here are at the moment the standard seats. However, the Australia edition does have full bucket seats. We'll need to go with that. That's an $11,000 option. In terms of stitching, we're going to need to bring this in as well. Interior trim with decorative stitching. That's also in the Australia edition. No one can argue that maybe you wouldn't necessarily want this. Maybe it is that you wouldn't necessarily want this decorative trim. Maybe you don't think it's good value. But the Australia edition has it, so if we're going to compare like with like, we're going to need to add it. So far we've spent quite a bit of money on options. When we do all of these amendments to get the seats vaguely like the Australia edition, we're now at $30,000. I dare say many people would not spend $30,000 on this, but that's another issue. Now, the racing seats I quite like. I probably wouldn't spend $11,000 on them, but they're nice enough. Now, if we go further down to other things, in terms of other equipment packages, we're going to potentially want to bring in this leather interior exclusive manufacturer. Now, in terms of what that gives us, what I do know is the Australia edition has an analog to this. I don't believe it has the exact same as this, in that I don't think it has all of it. But nevertheless, we're going to need to bring it in. Now, this option says it's a combination of colors. Black in combination of your choice of leather color, slate gray, blah, blah, blah. Leather interior, leather partly with decorative stitching, included equipment, dashboard trim package in leather, door trim package in leather, steering column casing in leather, storage compartment lid embossed with Porsche exclusive manufacturer, cup holder trim leather, belt outlet trims in race text. So let's add that. Now this will delete a couple of other options, or at least deal with another couple of options rather. So that's what we've got so far. We'll also need to add the chrono package here, it is rather adding the chrono package, which is what the Australia edition has. And then it's removing our plain leather interior, i.e. it's basically doing a substitution. So I'll accept the changes, and then this brings us into with this option. With crayon stitching, and then click Save. Now, so far, we are up to 49,000 in terms of options. In terms of other exterior packages, it doesn't really have these. We could go lightweight roof in carbon. Of all of the options so far, that's one of the ones I'd actually go with, potentially, although mainly in the plain GT3. But the Australia edition doesn't have it, so we'll leave it. We also don't really have these other options either. Whether or not one would want them is another issue, but we don't really have them. So we can largely skip through most of these other options that we'd otherwise have here. We don't really need the decorative stitching, or decorative logos rather, or the side stickers, etc., etc. In terms of the fuel filler cap, I don't believe the Australia edition has this, but let's err on the side of caution and add it just in case. It may or may not have that. As far as I can tell, it doesn't. Paint protection film, that's actually pretty decent, to be honest. The Australia edition doesn't mention that it has this, but one can argue this is actually pretty decent, but that's another issue entirely. An exterior mirror upper trims in carbon, you could probably do this aftermarket for cheaper. I don't know that it's worth it. The Australia edition doesn't have it. One could argue about whether or not you want to do it. It's another question entirely. On dark silver, I don't think it makes much difference. Then we go down to drivetrain or chassis. Now here we have an option of the PDK or the 6-speed GT, or 6-speed manual. I would go with PDK. That's going to be, they're the same price. Chrono package, we do need that because the Australia edition has that. Porsche composite ceramic brakes, it does not have that as far as I can tell. We could add this, of course. It would be an expensive option, but we could add it. Now it says brake calipers painted in black. The Australia edition does have this. I don't know why you'd want it. Why you'd care, but in any case, we'll add that. Now we don't have these other brake options, so we don't need to add that either. In terms of lights and vision, we do have tinted LED main lights. We don't have the LED matrix as far as I can tell, but that's but we don't have the we don't have to add anything else there. Now the LED matrix, I don't believe we need that either. Now tinted LED matrix, again, don't need that. Exclusive design tail lights. I don't believe the Australia edition has this either, but we can add it just in case. I mean, at the moment, we've got $51,000 in options. Let's add it just to err on the side of caution. Then we continue down. Comfort and assistant packages, we don't have that. Interior, light design package, we do have that. In terms of what the light design package does, let's click on this. Now, what it says here, it says, additional ambient lighting surrounding the door storage compartments, the center console, and the rear area. Dimmable and available in 7 colors, including the standard front footwell lighting. All right, well, it has the light package anyway in the Australia edition, so there we go. Seat heating, to my mind, shouldn't be an option at a car this expensive. Storage package, well, it's free. We'll leave that anyway. Vehicle key painted in exterior color, we'll add that. That will be slate gray. You can choose a different color, it seems, but slate gray. And it appears that for some reason, something has messed up in terms of what is happening with my options. So it is removing my leather interior exclusive manufacturer. I believe that must be because it must come with an option like this. I'll go cancel because that will actually make it cheaper. So we want to err on the side of making this as expensive as possible. Then we can continue down. Seatbelts are the same. Chrono stopwatch is the same. Nothing else to really add here. Then we can keep continuing down. Interior in leather. Not much else to add about this. We've got extended leather. Now, we can add this, or at least try to add this, just for the sake of erring on the side of caution. Now, the Australia edition does not have this, as far as I can tell. The Australia edition does not have the extended leather, so what we've basically got here is that we've added more than the Australia edition, as far as I can tell, but we're erring on the side of caution. So that's what we've got so far. Not much else that we really need here otherwise. Crest on storage compartment lid. I don't even know what that does. In any case, we don't really have other options that we need to add right now. And this is effectively still coming in at under the Porsche Australia edition price. Now, in terms of the race tech, we've already largely added this because of our option before. Our exclusive manufacturer interior option already added a lot of this race techs. So we don't really need that either. However, I mean, one can add some additional stuff here, but this isn't in the Australia edition. It also doesn't have interior carbon, aluminium, or the like, so we don't need to add anything there. In terms of audio and communication, we do need to add the Bose surround system. And then in terms of other extended individualization, not much else to add there. All right, so that's what I've got so far. Now, what I've done is I've added options that to my mind are actually more than what the Australia edition has. I've added $65,000 worth of options. And I've gone over speccing the car to err on the side of caution, i.e., I've been as conservative as possible in that I've tried to add as much as possible that would be, if anything, more than what the Australia edition has. And I'm still not up to the price of that car. What that immediately tells us is that Porsche's pricing is to some extent upping the price here in order to try to effectively benefit from the limited edition run, even though one is not necessarily gaining very much more from this over the standard car. So to my mind, this 911 GT3 Australia edition is a little bit of a marketing gimmick. I don't think we really gain very much for the money that you'd have to spend. And I'm not sure that it really is much of a special edition. To my mind, when everything's a special edition, nothing ends up being special. and I'm not sure that one really is going to gain very much from this. So to my mind, it's a little bit overpriced, and I wouldn't be ordering one. I might consider a plain GT3, although the depreciation there is still quite large, to be totally clear. So I probably wouldn't order one new. But nevertheless, I wouldn't order an Australian edition at the prices that they are looking for. I suspect these special editions might roll out in other markets, so we can easily see other things like this pop up elsewhere. But this appears not to be a brilliant use of money. And in any case, those are my thoughts on the 911 Australian edition. If you have any thoughts about it, if you think I've missed anything, if you think I'm totally wrong, let me know that in the comments below. And otherwise, of course, it would be great if you like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you for future videos as well. Bye!